Welcome, everyone. Today we will discuss the Russian financial crisis of 1998, also called the Ruble Crisis. This event reshaped both Russia's economy and international financial markets. We will review the timeline, the parties involved, what happened, why it happened, how it unfolded, how it ended, and which countries were affected. In early 1998, Russia faced falling oil prices, shrinking fiscal revenues, and growing budget deficits. By May, investors were increasingly concerned, and bond yields surged. In July 1998, the International Monetary Fund approved a $22.6 billion support package to stabilize Russia. However, this was not enough to restore investor confidence. On August 17, 1998, the crisis climaxed. The Russian government defaulted on domestic debt, known as GKOs, devalued the ruble, and declared a moratorium on payments to foreign creditors. Following the default, the ruble lost about two-thirds of its value, banks collapsed, inflation soared, and ordinary Russians saw their savings vanish. The main parties included the Russian government under President Boris Yeltsin and Prime Minister Sergei Kiriyenko, the Central Bank of Russia, and the Finance Ministry. International institutions such as the IMF and World Bank were heavily engaged. Private investors, domestic banks, and Russian citizens were directly affected. Political figures like Anatoly Shubais and Viktor Chernomyrdin also played critical roles. The Russian government defaulted on part of its domestic debt, devalued the ruble, and froze payments to foreign creditors. This set off a wave of panic, causing the banking sector to collapse and the economy to contract sharply. There were several reasons for the Russian financial crisis to happen. Russia relied heavily on oil revenues, and when oil prices fell, revenues collapsed. Budget deficits had been financed with short-term debt instruments, creating rollover risks. Weak tax collection and political instability worsened matters. The Asian financial crisis of 1997 further undermined investor confidence in emerging markets, including Russia. Russia attempted to defend the ruble through foreign reserve interventions, but reserves quickly depleted. Investors lost confidence, refusing to roll over debt. By August, the government had no choice but to default and devalue. Banks that held large amounts of GKOs and foreign currency liabilities collapsed, amplifying the crisis. Recovery began in 1999 as oil prices rebounded, and the weaker ruble made Russian exports more competitive. Fiscal adjustments and political stabilization under Vladimir Putin, who became prime minister in August 1999, further aided recovery. Russia was hit the hardest, but spillovers reached other emerging markets. Brazil faced a crisis in 1999, partly linked to Contagion. Western banks and investors with exposure to Russian debt suffered large losses. In the United States, the hedge fund Long-Term Capital Management nearly collapsed due to its Russian bond exposure, requiring a coordinated rescue. The Russian financial crisis of 1998 exposed the risks of fiscal mismanagement, commodity dependence, and weak institutions. While recovery was relatively quick thanks to rising oil prices, the crisis left lasting lessons about sovereign default, investor confidence, and the dangers of sudden capital flight in emerging markets. This concludes our discussion about the Russian financial crisis of 1998. See you at the next lecture.